Thank you, Mr Wilson. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and it's always a pleasure to follow the spokesman for the SNP, who during my time as Minister for Disabled People was one of the most constructive members of the opposition who engaged regularly with good proactive ideas. And I wish to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Newcastle upon Tyne North, who set out the horrific case of Lee Irving, and there's no other way of describing that. And nobody would fail to be touched by the pure emotion that was shown. And it's no surprise, because the system failed. The system failed somebody so vulnerable. It should never have happened. And we have two ministers present who I know deeply care about some of those most vulnerable people in society. And they will have listened, and I have no doubt that they will take this forward. And I very much hope that one of the commitments today will be for them to meet with yourself and with Beverly to learn those lessons. We can't put the clock back, but what we need to do is make sure this never, ever happens again. Because what horrified me most of all was all of those warnings, the fact that the family had flagged up, that they felt they weren't part of those decisions. And the Honourable Member summed it up when she said that he was treated as an adult, but really he was a child. And yes, he was. And we just have to do everything we can collectively to make sure that those lessons are very much learnt. And these are the two ministers who are best equipped to do that. And I know they deeply care. And it's a tribute that this has been flagged today, because this is the best way that we can make a difference going forward on that. And I was very proud to serve as a disabilities minister. And I remember once being interviewed. I did a lot of national news, and they were normally quite tricky. And that was the first time I heard the statistic about only 6% of those with a learning disability would expect to find employment, contrasting to around about 80% across the population. It is by far the worst statistic of any disability. Yet at the same time, you meet anybody with a learning disability, particularly young people, they have an incredible amount of enthusiasm, energy, determination. Now, it's not necessarily the case that all of them will go on to have or be able to have a full-time job. For some of them, doing an hour a week is the equivalent of landing that dream job. And you talk to their families and their friends, and they're all united in wanting an opportunity to contribute, to be able to feel part of society. And I was greatly impressed when I went on a visit to Fox's Hotel in Bridgewater. It was one of my favourite visits. They were part of a TV programme, and I had seen that TV programme, so I recognised some of the young adults when I went down. I was very starstruck and demanded lots of photographs. And what they did, it was a 3-year course. It was in a former hotel, and it's a working hotel now, and the young adults would spend 3 years there, and it had two roles. The first role was that they would develop independent living skills. So they would start very heavily supervised, and over the 3 years they'd progress further up the hotel to become more and more independent until the very end of their 3-year experience they'd go into a separate house. And that was equipping them with the skills to then have the best chance to live independently, because once you get to 25, you really need that. And remember, a lot of these people rely on their family and friends, and the biggest fear for those family and friends are when their health starts to fail, who is there to look after them? And it was brilliant. They were really, really well equipped. The second part was to develop skills that would give them an opportunity to work. And the hotel worked with the other hotels, restaurants and care homes across Bridgewater and surrounding areas to train them with the skills where there were jobs vacancies. That was the key. There were actually job vacancies for them. And then towards the end, they would spend their final year working in those hotels, restaurants, care homes, doing different roles, supervised, patient training, because it would take longer for them to pick up that role. But at the end of it, the vast majority of them remained in employment. Something like 80% of them remained in employment, of which half of them were paid. And this was brilliant. In fact, one lad I saw, he shortly afterwards celebrated his birthday in his employment. They baked him a cake and they sent me a wonderful picture. And I was really touched by that, because the key here was we made sure each and every one of those young adults were given the very best opportunities to have an independent life, to be able to participate and engage constructively in society. And the employers benefited. The employers were not doing this for charity. They were filling skills gaps. Yes, they had to be more patient with the training. But by doing that, they ended up with somebody who was enthusiastic, always turned up on work, always had a big smile on their face, and made their workforce a better place. So they came back year after year. And I called the head teacher. And she was very cynical about politics. And she made that very clear in her speech. We all have those. We go on visits and they don't always roll out the red carpet when you turn up. But she saw my enthusiasm and she acknowledged that in the speech. And I said to her, I need to talk to you in more detail. I need to understand why there isn't a Fox's Hotel in every single constituency. So she came down to Parliament, and ultimately it came down to two things. One, postcode lottery of funding. So in some towns we've got brilliant examples where things are going really well, but there are too many towns where the system isn't joined up, where there aren't the opportunities, where there is too much demand and not enough supply. And secondly, that final year where it was a supervised work placement was very, very expensive. And that capped the numbers of young adults given this amazing opportunity. And that's where I said, well, why is this not an apprenticeship? Because it's work-based learning. That's everything that all politicians support. We all want more apprenticeships. And they said, well, we can't access the apprenticeship system because of most of our young adults wouldn't get the grade C at GCSE Maths and English. So I organised a meeting with the then Minister in Biz, my honourable friend for Grantham, and I said to him, we've got to get this sorted. And he 100% agreed. His officials fell about on the floor and had to be scraped back up. And they sort of gently reminded him, we don't want to dilute the perceived quality of apprenticeships. And I said, well, I don't care, rename it. Call it a disability apprenticeship. I do not care. We just need access to the funding. I'm not proud how we do it. So we came up with a cunning plan that we would ask my honourable friend for Blackpool and Cleveland's to head a task force. We gave him about 4 weeks to conclude this because the honourable friend for Grantham and I suspected we may not be the decision makers beyond about 4 weeks. We were right. So we needed to get that into motion. And I am delighted that that is now coming online. And I hope that allows the left hand and the right hand to join together to give those young people an opportunity. Now, just a final few requests I have. First of all, the Solicitor General has been absolutely fantastic on disability hate crime. When I lobbied to make sure that the justice system was better, and we still have a long way to go, he was really, really engaged. And it is great that we have seen an increase in reporting because the system is getting better at it. There's still a long way to go. The case highlighted how it didn't recognise it in that case. It is clear. And yes, my legal knowledge is based on just watching Columbo on a Sunday, so I don't profess to be a total expert, but it is absolutely clear they took advantage of his disability. So in my mind, there is no discussion on this. It should have been a disability hate crime. The government is engaged on that, the Solicitor General is engaged on that, and we should all keep passing on examples of where it's either working or not working, because the government is determined to get this right. But I've just got 4 very quick requests. One, we must embrace innovation and technology. I loved going to events where we as a nation were spearheading brilliant new products to help people with learning disabilities and other disabilities with their everyday lives. And we can be a world leader in this. Secondly, don't forget the power of sport. Nothing matches the time I took part in a learning disability netball game. I literally thought the other participants were going to explode with excitement. These are people who had never had an opportunity to exercise. Many of them were overweight. One girl I met, or one young adult I'd met, she had lost 3 stone over the summer. I've never seen people more enthusiastic about an opportunity to engage. The power of sport. And I urge the ministers to continue to remind the DCMS ministers. We have to tackle the postcode lottery, an absolute must. And finally, don't forget the families. It is a huge challenge for families. Many I met were the ones where there was a good network of support, hence how they'd got themselves through the postcode lottery. But there are so many carers who are not best equipped to navigate an incredibly complicated system, and those vulnerable people, ultimately, who they are responsible for, miss out. We all collectively have to do much, much better to improve the system. There's lots of good practice. We just have to make sure that's a given.